Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to begin with a quote. A genuine liberal education will produce whole persons with intellectual breadth, able to think at right angles to their major field, practical persons, able to act competently, and persons with deep commitment, willing to roll up their sleeves and join the struggle to build a humane and sustainable world. Above all, they will make themselves relevant to the crisis of our age, which in its various manifestations is about the care, nurturing, and enhancement of life. And life is the only defensible foundation for a liberal education. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the talk that you're about to hear from our keynote speaker, following the wonderful symposium you've been attending that's titled Sustainable Design from Lead to Living Buildings. This symposium, as you all know because you've been attending it, and I'd like to thank, is hosted by the Dartmouth Sustainability Initiative and the Environmental Guild of New Hampshire chapter of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. The lecture tonight is actually sponsored by the Environmental Studies program in a wonderful lecture series they have called the George G. Link Jr. Environmental Lecture Series. My name's Carol Folt. I'm the acting provost and dean of faculty. But I think tonight, more importantly, I'm an environmental scientist and biologist and a great fan of tonight's speaker. As you certainly guessed, that quote that I just read is a quote from tonight's speaker, Dr. David Orr, from his book titled Ecological Literacy, Education, and the Transition to a Postmodern World. And it seems so relevant to the subject of today's symposium on sustainable design. He said, persons of commitment willing to roll up their sleeves and join the struggle to build a humane and sustainable world. Dr. Orr is certainly such a person. He holds the Paul Sears Distinguished Professorship of Environmental Studies and Politics at Oberlin College. He just told me that he's in a Department of Environmental Studies, and it had the most fights when he was the only professor in the department, but now that department has really grown to have quite a few people. We were laughing about it because I said, as acting provost and dean of faculty, we thought we put those positions together so we wouldn't argue. But instead, I think I'm getting in lots of arguments with myself here, so we can really relate to that. It's such a pleasure to have David here. He's a scholar, he's a teacher, a writer, he's a speaker, an entrepreneur. His own work covers such a range of subjects from politics to environmental studies, science, climate change. And he's been a visionary leader, of course, in environmental education, campus greening, green building, and of course, ecological design. He's a very prolific author. I was looking through a number of quotes from people about his work, and one of them jumped out at me, and it's a quote by George Woodwell, who many of you know as a director emeritus from the Woodholes Research Center, but he's also a Dartmouth undergraduate, so we love to think about George. And he said that he describes David's work as lucid, richly documented, and very powerful. His lifetime of work really on behalf of the planet has brought him, of course, numerous awards and leadership opportunities. And I think his work in sustainable design is particularly inspirational in face of the great global challenges to sustainability across the globe. I was reading back at the article that he wrote in the Chronicle of Higher Education in the year 2000, and that's where he challenged the universities and colleges to seek carbon neutrality. And he organized and funded an effort to define carbon neutral plan for his own campus in Oberlin. And of course, we know 10 years later, hundreds of colleges and universities, including Oberlin, have made that pledge. He has many projects underway. I imagine he'll talk about some of them today, including a several million-dollar collaborative project working for the Obama administration. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what it's like to be in Washington working on these issues right now. Last term, we had the wonderful writer and environmentalist Terry Tempest Williams on campus as a Montgomery lecture. And I think probably many of you know Terry and know how much what David does is very central to the way she thinks about the world. one of the things that I always remember Terry says is that she talks about building community in the name of a reverence for life. And I think that she would echo me in saying that Dr. Orr is a person who builds community in a name of a reverence of life and helps us to do this every day. As he said, when we heal the earth, we heal ourselves. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Orr on his talk, Designable Design, Hope. There you go.
Carol, thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for a warm welcome. You've been at this for the whole day, right? And I've got a 3-hour talk coming at you, so be sure to drink lots of coffee and eat the chocolate dessert. This is great to be here, and I can't come back to Dartmouth without thinking about previous visits when Donella Meadows was on the faculty here, and Donella, as all of you know, died way too soon. Mark Rosenbaum in the back was one of the very early people in 1992 that came to Oberlin and really got me involved in thinking about green building. He came out to help in the thinking about the project that later became the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. You'll see 2 pictures of that in these slides. I found a few Oberlin alums. They're everywhere. You can't go anywhere without finding Oberlin alums. And that's great. And the project I'm going to describe has been aided in incredible ways by alums, a network of alums around the country. I'm not an architect. I'm not a designer, but some of my friends are. And I have learned a lot from them. So this is not a technical talk. This is from somebody who would like to engage your services. But I will tell you this, as an outsider looking in at your profession, this is an amazing transformation. If you've come into the field, well, in the past 10 years, it may seem a bit like old hat, but if you are older, as I am, and you think back of where we were in the early 90s or before, the green building revolution is an amazing transformation in how we think about making the human presence on the planet. So thanks to Mark and all of you in the room for the work in this. This has become really the cutting edge of the environmental movement in the past years when not much else was moving. I'm going to widen the focus a bit tonight, and I won't take 3 hours to do it, maybe 2. You all aren't laughing at that. I'll be quick, all right. I'm the thing that stands between you and the bar, and that's not a comfortable position to be in. There are 2 comments. One is, to start, can we build incredible buildings powered largely, if not entirely, by efficiency and renewable energy? We know now the answer is yes. Can we raise the bar to what Jason McLennan and some of you are describing as the living building challenge? And that's a different performance-based standard. How does the thing actually work? And I think there the answer is yes. Dana and I and Janine Benyus have been talking about kind of offline and casually off to the side about can we change the standard even higher and go to a biomimetic standard where the building and the site actually operates rather or provides the same ecological services as it provided before a building was on the site. And I think there the answer will prove to be yes. But that's a challenge. We haven't done that yet. But now we have to go farther. We have to begin to thinking about scale up. Can we go to the scale of a whole community, to a small town, to a region, and to the whole world? Now we've got to take this revolution to scale. So I want to pat you on the back for what all of you have done over the past 2 decades. It's been an incredible transformation, but I want to tell you that the best and the hardest is yet to come. And that's the subject of tonight's talk. Christopher Alexander, the author of lots of works in architecture, including the great book Pattern Language, and then more recently in the last 10 years, 4 incredible volumes with some more coming out. Alexander says that when you build a thing, you have to repair the world around it. And it's that repairing the world around it that I'm going to talk about tonight. On the screen, the left-hand image is, this is a, by the way, can I get is there a way to dim this front row of lights? Is that possible? On the left-hand side of the screen, down to the wire, is a book that I wrote last year, came out last year. And it's a 35,000-foot meditation on what it means for us to live in this particular era. And if you're biblical about this, what we're doing in this era, we are driving or evicting ourselves from the only paradise humans have ever known. And that is called by the geologists the Holocene, that 10 or 12,000 year interlude in which we became human. We became everything not too down too far. Maybe just a wee bit lighter. That's great. That's great. Is that okay for all of you? But we're evicting ourselves from the only paradise we've ever known. This 10 to 12,000 year interlude, that's the Holocene. And in that era, the level of CO2 in the atmosphere never went above roughly 280 or 290 parts per million. We're now at 392. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But that's the only paradise we've ever known. This is a brand new era. So down to the wire is kind of a meditation at 35,000 feet on what it means to live in this era. The second item, the middle part here, Carol referred to this. This was a 2.5-year effort by about 250 people that we assembled. My other job is to work for a foundation, and we assembled a group of about 250 scientists and policy people to work on climate action in the first 100 days of the next U.S. administration, be it Democrat or Republican, didn't matter. We were going to work with whomever. We met with all the candidates during the primary season, including President Obama, except for one, Fred Thompson, who didn't think it was an issue. We didn't think he was an issue either. But anyway, that was a... What we wanted to do is to aim at the first 100 days of the next administration. What do? And climate and energy are the linchpins. Get those right, and you get lots of other things right as well. And we said to President Obama, or President-elect Obama, that there wasn't a moment to spare. You've got no margin of error on this issue. There are many people, including James Lovelock, arguably the best independent scientist in the world, now in his 80s, but James Lovelock says it's already too late. So somewhere between Stuart Brand on one side and James Lovelock on the other, those are the brackets of the rational debate. But there are many people who say we don't have a moment to lose, and we were on that list. Down here at street level, and I'll get to this, this is the Oberlin Project, and I'll describe that in some detail. But this has been, for the last 4 or 5 years of my life, it's been focused very much on climatic, not global warming, but climatic destabilization, and that destabilizes everything. So let me start. Background. All of you, all of us have been aware for the past 2 years of the economic downturn. And it's been in all the papers. Given the downturn, our priorities have shifted, our attention span has shifted. That's not the subject of this talk, but this is an historic moment. I'm going to rank this with one of the most historic moments ever in U.S. history. Alan Greenspan, on October 23rd, discovered a flaw in his way of thinking about the economy. This is the same Alan Greenspan that last week admitted that his decisions about the economy were 70% correct, 30% wrong. Imagine getting on an airplane and having a pilot say, my batting average is really good. 70% of the decisions I make here in a cockpit are right. 30% are wrong. Or as Frank Rich said in his column on Sunday in the Times, that imagine the captain of the Titanic giving the same ratio. Anyway, you get the point. Now, the problem here is this is what Alan Greenspan and others called success. This is the sprawl economy. This is the automobile-driven economy. This isn't something that was in our grandchildren will look back and wonder, why did they ever think of this as success? Sprawl, bad construction, bad quality. The culture has been, as somebody said at the dinner table tonight, thoroughly corrupted. This was success, but that is also the flaw in Alan Greenspan's thinking. The laws of the economy that Greenspan believes to be true, or did believe to be true, date from Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. You remember reading that way back when? 1776, that was published. But those compete with the laws of evolution on the planet that are roughly 3.8 billion years old. And the idea of infinite growth and so forth. And I can't put this slide on the screen without thinking of Donella Meadows and her work on limits to growth back in 1972 and 73, and the subsequent reissue of that book in an updated revised edition around the year 2000. But her voice on this issue was sterling, it was clear, it was a very loud trumpet. You can't have infinite growth in a finite space. And even if you could, we aren't up to managing it. But you get the point there. This is Tom Toll's version of the whole thing. The whole economy was kind of a Ponzi scheme, and the question here is, are those illegal? But there's another issue here. You didn't have to just look at numbers to see something was wrong here. I live near Detroit. It's about on a straight line about 75 miles from Oberlin, Ohio, which is on the east side of Cleveland. But the abandonment of a city that was once a thriving, dirty, brawling, prosperous city of 2.2 million, now down to 800,000 people just barely hanging on. So you didn't have to look all that far to see that there were flaws in a system that abandons that much infrastructure and, more importantly, that many people. And this, of course, you didn't have to do anything more than pay attention to the headlines of the paper. This is the I-35 bridge collapse in Minneapolis, infrastructure falling behind. All of you in the room know this, and you see the numbers as well as I do. $2.2 trillion in arrears on bridges, pipes, wires, basic infrastructure that services the buildings and the communities that you all design and that we all live in. There's a darker image of America. And out there, if you get real quiet and kind of take the temperature of the time, there's a darker image of the urban future, and it isn't pretty. In a rapidly urbanizing world, there is fear that we won't be able to hold together. And that's part of the challenge for you and for me and for all of us in this generation. Can we build lovely and decent and fair and sustainable or durable urban settlements? And we don't have an option not to do that. We have got to do that. So we've got to turn those nightmare scenarios into success stories and build humane and decent cities. And I believe that many of you in this room are working on that. Gary Larson, I think, caught it right. There are things happening here much faster, and they're much closer than they may appear. Can all of you in the back see that? Gary Larson was one of the zanier, sane people of our time, and I wish he'd come back to cartooning again. So there's another deficit underway. This is the deficit of, well, lots of ways to describe this. In the climatic terms, it's the 7 billion tons of carbon that linger in the atmosphere every year. That's that 2 parts per million or more increase in CO2 in the atmosphere, and that deficit isn't going away. Now, the trick for our generation, and certainly for the White House, is to figure out how you solve that deficit without compounding that deficit. And so stimulus package money spent on roads and carbon-intensive activities compounds a second deficit. We'll figure out the first one somehow, some way, but the problem was, and the trick was, to figure out that first deficit. How do you solve the first deficit in a way that didn't compound the second one? The first one is a short-term deficit. The second one is virtually, as we measure time, long time. Any questions on that slide? Don't you just love PowerPoint? You know, you people from about the halfway back can't see a thing on the screen, but let me tell you what it is. This is a kind of a timeline. Down here at the bottom left-hand corner is 1896. That's Svante Arrhenius, a Swedish scientist and one of the founders of modern physical chemistry. And Arrhenius was going through a really nasty divorce. It was an emotionally trying time for him, and he deflected his emotional anguish into making some of the most tedious statistical calculations anyone has ever done. And it was, what is the forcing effect of CO2 in the atmosphere? What's the effect on temperature? And he got it ballpark right. I don't recommend this as a way to deal with emotional anguish, but he got it right. Now, as a Swede, he thought that warming the Earth a bit was a good thing. But this is simply a timeline of when he wrote his paper on global warming. It was about 290 parts per million. We're now at about 392 parts per million. And remember, there's a 30-year, give or take, lag between what comes out of our tailpipes and smokestacks, and the climate change-driven weather events that we see. And we've had lots of warnings along here. This is kind of like Nicole Krauss writing in her book, The History of Love, that there were rumors of unfathomable things. And because we couldn't fathom them, we didn't believe them until it was too late and we had no choice. And so we've had warnings. We've had over a century now of warnings. When we got into the President's Climate Action Plan, what we gave to President Obama, we discovered that the first warning to a U.S. president was given in 1965. I worked as part of Jimmy Carter's transition team in 1976, and we warned the president of climatic change then and tied it to energy policy and so forth. We've had the warnings. We've now had 4 warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, literally thousands of scientific papers that document this in ever more rigorous detail. And so there's no debate among climate scientists that something bad is happening and we're the cause of it. There will be debate on some of the minor details. Now, this is bad news. This is David Archer's work, or a quote from a book called The Long Thaw. David Archer is a atmospheric physicist from the University of Chicago. And he begins the book by saying the climatic impacts of releasing fossil fuel CO2 to the atmosphere will last longer than Stonehenge, longer than time capsules, longer than nuclear waste, far longer than the age of human civilization so far. Each ton of coal that we burn leaves CO2 gas in the atmosphere. The CO2 coming from a quarter of that ton will still be affecting the climate 1,000 years from now. And what he doesn't say is about 20% will be affecting the climate 100,000 years from now. Now, you stop and you take a deep breath. If I reach down behind a podium and I pulled out, let's say, a sawed-off shotgun and snap it shut and kind of casually stroll down here and walk toward you, I would have your attention in a much more fundamental and direct way than I have it now with that on the screen. And what happens is your fight-flight mechanism, your adrenal system kicks in. And you would either be ready to rush me and wrestle the gun away from me, or you'd be headed for the door. You'd say, that was a pretty good dinner, but I'm out of here. The talk was dull. But to say 392 parts per million doesn't hit anybody where you live. But this is the reality of the matter. Now, it's also difficult another way. As Americans, we like to be optimistic. We are problem solvers. We get things done, and you know, broken carburetor on a Chevy, which happens frequently, you know, that's a solvable problem more or less. But we're used to thinking of things being solvable. But what David Archer is saying and what IPCC is saying is it isn't solvable. It may be, with adroit, quick, wise action and a bit of luck, it may be containable, but it isn't solvable. Now, you hesitate. When we got in the President's Climate Action Plan, the question is, how do you message this? John Holdren, who is President Obama's science advisor, was a part of the group until he got busy with other things. But how do you message this? How do you tell people that we've changed atmospheric chemistry effectively, permanently, and there is no known solution as we understand that word? And then especially after Copenhagen, and after a year of dawdling, or years of dawdling and denial, what do you tell people about this? The biggest issue to hit humankind, exclusive of nuclear weapons, is climatic destabilization. It isn't global warming. It's total destabilization of everything we take for granted. And it is relatively permanent. Here's a summary. Scientific consensus among those who study climate for a living is about 100%. Humans are the cause. Now, you have to make a distinction between people who study climate for a living and have to live by the rigors of peer review, fact, logic, data, and evidence, or they don't eat, and then the rest of the crowd. And among the climate scientists, the theory is, you know, when people say, do you believe in global warming, that's like asking, do you believe in the laws of gravity? You know, it's a science. It's simply how the world works. It's not like, do you believe in this religion or whatever? It is simply the science. And it's funny, we don't ask that when we need individual medical help. Nobody goes to a doctor and doctor says, hey, you got cancer or heart problems. And, well, that's a liberal view, and blows it off. No, we want the best science that money can buy. You may want a second opinion, but you want good science. Secondly, the whole issue is unfolding faster at a larger scale than we thought possible even a few years ago. When the fourth IPCC report came out, I was with some of the members of the IPCC that won the Nobel Prize for their work on that for dinner the day it was announced, and they said that very day that this thing is obsolete. The report is because we didn't, you know, I was going around saying, the cryosphere is melting. I was saying in talks that everything on the planet is melting except Dick Cheney's heart. My wife told me, don't say that anymore, so I don't. The scale and duration is mostly permanent. And then we know now that the Earth systems aren't just linear. It's not just, you know, like this. It is a nonlinear system, which means there are straws that can break camels' backs, there are tipping points, and there are lots of surprises ahead. That's what the science says. And then finally, the risks are foolish. We know, and all of you in this work, and the incredible presentations, the last panel tonight I heard, incredible presentations, you all know that you can power buildings with a fraction, a very small fraction of the power that we used to use 20, 30, 40 years ago. We know that. And can you power the civilization on efficiency, sunlight, wind, biofuels, and technologies that are now in the pipeline, or some even just being dreamed about? And the answer comes out, yeah, we can do that. But the sense of wartime emergency that we've got to bring to this just simply isn't there. If you're old enough, you'll remember Walt Kelly's cartoon. I'm not going to read this slide, but the Walt Kelly's cartoon, he has a possum was the star of the cartoon. It was simply called Pogo. And he's got Pogo back in 1977 cogitating about, that's my word, about environmental issues. And he finally concludes that we've met the enemy and he's us. And that's a pretty good way to think about it. Climatic change is us. Now, there's a campaign of denial, and it bears a lot of resemblance to other campaigns of denial where science is blown off and a well-constructed and incredibly well-funded program of denial happens. And we saw that with cigarette smoking. We saw it with auto safety and seat belts. We've seen it with virtually everything. We saw it for a long time in the Clean Air Act of 1990 that was passed under George H.W. Bush's administration, and that was said to be going to be a disaster for the economy. It turned out to be a boon for the economy. So there is a denial campaign. Alan Brandt, in his book, The Cigarette Century, said the industry was aggressively solicitous in identifying and supporting skeptics. They were invited to join the scientific advisory board of the Tobacco Institute for Research. They and their home institutions were provided with research grants. Their views were sought and broadcast widely. In this way, the tobacco industry managed to sustain the widespread perception of an active and highly contested scientific controversy into the 1960s, despite the overwhelming evidence and scientific consensus that smoking caused serious disease. We have the consensus on climate change. There is no doubt about it. Even if there were a doubt about it, and let's say the doubts were in the roughly, let's say, 50% range. You, if you're rational, wouldn't get into a car if there was a 1 chance in 2 of a fatal accident in that car while you were in it. You wouldn't get it in the car. You certainly wouldn't put your grandchildren in a car with 50-50 chance of an accident, or 10%, or let's say 1 chance in 1,000. You wouldn't do it if you're rational. But in that case, the risks are fairly small, a person or 2, as painful as they would be if the worst were to transpire. But in this case, the risks are to the entire Earth. Well, you all know this. The risks are not comparable. They are to the whole planet, to the whole enterprise of life across all species, and for, as we measure time, for all time. How many recognize that curve? Anybody not recognize that curve? How about that one? How about that one? All right, how about that one? Now, one of these can kill you. Wait a minute. 3 of them can kill you. The one on the right, this is the Keeling Curve. This is David Keeling's work, Mauna Loa. This is 1958 when he first went there and began to measure carbon dioxide. Now, the problem we have is public perception doesn't pick this up. We're focused on virtually all the wrong things. That's not the subject of this talk, but I think we have to reckon with some issues here. I don't want to get into causes. That is a separate talk. But the book on the left-hand side is Richard Hofstadter's very famous book called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. Came out, I think if I remember correctly, around 1963. And Susan Jacoby's book, The Age of American Unreason, on the right. Both describe, in Al Gore's book in the middle, a dark strain in American thinking. Now, I put this on here not to get into controversial issues about how Americans can be statistically, the most confused, ill-informed, misinformed people of any developed nation. And that's poll data from Tony Lacerowitz at Yale and the Gallup poll, and it's very consistent data. Americans don't understand this. And how that ties into your work and my work. Can architecture be a form of pedagogy? Can architecture and design be instructive and help raise our collective IQ? Because the media aren't doing it. Our leadership is not, by and large, doing this. Can we do it? All right. That's all the bad news. This summarizes where I want to go. There is a dramatic transformation in how we understand systems. It has not been headline material. You don't see it on the cover of Time magazine or any of the airport newsstand magazines. But we understand systems largely because of work of people like Dana Meadows in the systems group at MIT, but lots of other people in biology and the earth system sciences. And then secondly, you heard from Dana today at lunchtime about part of the science of reweaving the human presence in the world. And think about what we know about not just biomimicry, but also your work in building design, urban planning, industrial ecology, sustainable agriculture and forestry and so forth. So what has happened over the past 40 years, or maybe even longer, is that an incredible amount of intellectual capital, know-how, and technology has been assembled. We aren't fated to end with a whimper or bang or suffer the heat death of the planet. That is a choice we would make by default. And all of you in this, or all of us in this room, are committed to a very different future. It's a future in which humans live as well as we possibly can live, fairly, decently, and durably. But now we have the know-how to do that. And then we understand a whole lot about how the world works. And I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but this is all about systems. And the upshot, it seems to me, looks a little bit like this. We know that we ought to optimize systems, not components. That comes straight out of Amory Lovins. End-use efficiency before supply, and that's just basic physics and the work of many in your room, certainly Mark Rosenbaum. Full cost, not short-term cost, that's just smart economics. I was with a hotelier on Tuesday in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he announced that virtually every hotel built in the United States is a piece of crap, even if it's said to be a green hotel. Quality has not been foremost on the agenda, and part of the reason is the people that buy your services as your clients really cut corners, and all the gauges and dials are for doing short-term kind of buildings. We need to change the instructions, change the default setting that you build buildings that have at least a lifespan of 100 years or longer. That's sustainable. And then local solutions first, that's all about resilience. Conservation equals conservative, and then people matter. That's just justice, morality, and so forth. And the people that matter include future generations that should not and could not be deprived of life, liberty, and property, and for lots of reasons we don't have to get into. There is a new economy, in other words, possible, and your role as designers and builders and architects is to make that world, the physical apparatus of that world, come into being. And many of you are engaged every day in this work, and you know much better than I do. But it isn't just about buildings. It's about the world around it. Remember Chris Alexander? You build something, but you've got to repair the things around it. And so repairing the fabric, the social and ecological fabric, and how we provision buildings and whole communities and so forth. This is where I live, upper Midwest. The base of that arrow is Oberlin, Ohio. That's Lake Erie right there. This is Cleveland. That's Youngstown, Ohio, and I grew up on just right about here, 17 miles from downtown Youngstown. If an invading army had done to Youngstown what the capitalist system did, we would be ready to declare war. We would have declared war a long time ago. That was a brawling city, much like Detroit, that's now essentially a ghost town. That's Toledo, Ohio, rather similar on a straight line. That's where Detroit is. The project that we've got, what we're calling the Oberlin Project, has three goals. One is, we want to take the arts that you all know about, of building and designing buildings and so forth, and we want to raise that to the neighborhood scale. We are working on a 13-acre block We'll call it the Green Arts Block. We've told the design team that we've assembled to work on this that we want this done at the highest possible standard. And that standard, or the metric, will probably be a composite of USGBC's LEED rating system. It will include the Living Building Challenge, and it'll also include biomimetic standards. How those will blend together, I don't know. We've added one more criteria to this, and that is that the way this block is done has got to become a driver for the downtown development of a small Midwestern city. And so we want to do green development in a way that drives the economy in fundamentally different directions. Our second goal is to pursue energy efficiency and renewable energy as far as we can get it to get the city and the college both climate neutral or even further out climate positive. We were one of the early signatories of Second Nature's work, the President's Climate Commitment, which is now signed up. I think it's around 700 college and university presidents to take their institutions to be carbon neutral. That is so powerful. It's a huge statement. And it means that higher education is becoming a leader in this whole movement to move the whole society. And think of everybody else sitting down, the college and university presidents standing up on this issue and taking the society in a radically different direction. Colleges and universities have buying power. They're prestigious. They've got 14 or 15 million students. A couple million faculty are involved, or at least before the cuts there were a couple million faculty. This is an incredibly powerful statement. We want to take it one step further to bring the city along with us. Third goal is to create a 20,000-acre green belt around the city, and I'll say a few more words about that in just a minute. We expect three outcomes. We want to build what in our part of the world, the upper Midwest, would be the first prosperous post-carbon economy. We've got to make this visible. You and I are creatures of sight. We believe what we can see and touch and feel and experience. And right now the word sustainable doesn't mean a whole lot. It is kind of an abstraction, but we've got to make sustainability visible, not just in buildings and not just at the neighborhood scale, but now at the regional scale, eventually at the national scale, and of course the global scale. We want to use this, as we did with the Adam Joseph Lewis Center, as an educational project. Around that project, we drew a circle and we said, if you want to be part of building a green building, come on in. So we had about 250 students work with the design team on that building that is now 10 years old. We want to do the same thing on this. The goal is to have about 1,000 students work with incredible designers over the next 5 or 10 years. And we've also said to we hear a lot about breaking out of silos, and a typical college or university has silos by disciplines. But we also have silos between different kinds of educational institutions. There are VOTEC schools, and there are 2-year colleges, and there are 4-year colleges, and then there are public schools and magnet schools and so forth. We put together an educational consortium that includes all of those kinds of institutions. We said, come on, let's work together. Let's prepare a generation of young people for work in a green economy. Everything from banking, because once you put a price on carbon, you got a whole different economy, all the way over to bolting metal things together that capture sunlight. And then, this sounds kind of airy-fairy, but and this is going to sound like also an advertisement for Oberlin College, and I hesitate to give this on the Dartmouth campus, but I'm going to do it anyway. We turn out, not compared to Dartmouth, but we turn out as a college more young people that go on for PhDs in the sciences than any other comparable liberal arts college in the country. On the other side of the campus, we have one of the top-ranked conservatories of music in the world, a great art and drama program, and one of the very, very distinguished art museums in the country, generally ranked third behind those at Harvard and Yale. Now, part of the difficulty I think all of us have in this movement is that the way we frame these issues, the way we describe these issues, hits the side of the mind that's analytical. It's the male, typically the male side of the mind. It's analytical, it's numbers and metrics and all that kind of stuff. The other side of the mind, what's called or generally referred to as the female side, which is creative, intuitive, humorous, and so forth, is left out. That's the art side. Why not a conversation that melds both those? And every full-statured human being has both those sides apparent in them. So the goal here is to start a different conversation. Now, if we have Q&A afterwards and you say, well, what does that mean? I'm going to get a blank and panicked look on my face because I don't know. But it's have different people having lunch with each other. It's different conversations. It's different performances. It's art, the plastic arts, performing arts, the musical arts, informed by science and vice versa. It's a different conversation. It's the conversation about how and whether and the terms of engagement of humans on this planet as far out as you care to imagine. I'm going to skip over this slide, but these are the way we think about this. There are goals and drivers and agents. The agents here include a citywide effort with lots of organizations being involved. This is the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. This was completed. This began in 1995, or the planning began in 1995. We moved into it in the year 2000. I believe I'm correct in saying it's still the only entirely solar-powered building on a U.S. college campus. It's a zero-discharge building. We process all our wastewater. The criteria for the building was drinking water in, drinking water out. And to get pictures like this, we strapped a first-year student to a helium-filled balloon, gave her a camera with electronic download, and she didn't so much transfer, she just drifted out of Oberlin. This is the back of the building. Now, what we did in this project was to take an acre, roughly and a quarter, and we made it a laboratory for sustainability. All these big issues are, and you know with buildings, you've all seen this in your own projects. Buildings are pedagogical. There is an instructive element in them. And so what we did was to take an acre and a quarter, and we said, let's make this a laboratory for the big issues of sustainability that include food, wastewater cleaning, energy issues, building monitoring, and so forth. And so this place became kind of like Thoreau went to Walden. He said, I went to Walden to drive some of the problems of living into a corner where I could study them. We tried to do the same thing on this. And so the building wasn't just a place where we took the curriculum across the street, plugged it into a new, quote, green building. We let the building and the landscape and the design process drive the curriculum. We want to do the same thing with the larger Oberlin Project. So we're working on a vision with college and town. And that gets me involved in lots of meetings, lots of controversy, lots of church meetings, Rotary meetings, civic meetings, meetings down at City Hall. A good bit of this has to do with financing and how we actually begin to pay for these things. And we are not, as all of you know, we are not the rich country we once thought ourselves to be. We're a poor country, $10 trillion deficit. We're now running a huge bow wave of debt, both ecological and economic. And that will affect the work of all of us. Money, we're just not nearly as rich as we once thought. So now we have to think about how do we take savings and plow these back into new development in ways that reduce that ecological deficit while creating short-term prosperity. And it won't be the kind of prosperity we once thought we had, but it'll be a different kind of prosperity. The delivery mechanisms, we've got to change how we deliver services. A lot of this will be new businesses. One way to see the Oberlin Project is to change, we're trying to change the yellow pages of the phone book. And so if I had a phone book here, and sometimes I travel with one, and look under E for energy services or S for sustainability, anything you'd find voids. And the goal now is to fill those voids. And fill those in a way that starts new businesses, new jobs, but make it sustainable. Make it honest, authentic prosperity, not the subsidized kind. This means getting into public policy. So part of what we're aiming to do is to look at all the mines in the field through which we're now walking that have to do with building codes, as you know, sanitary codes, financing regulations, and all those kinds of things. We want to do this in a way that what we learn is generic and can be applied elsewhere. We've put together an educational consortium chaired by the superintendent of schools, because a good bit of this is to raise the civic understanding of sustainability, not just all the ain't it awful stuff, but the problem-solving part of this. How do we begin, in the face of the worst challenges, the most severe challenges humankind's ever faced, how do we begin to come together and remake the human presence in this place called Oberlin, Ohio? We don't want it to stop in Oberlin. And so one of the elements of this is going to be a center for ecological design. And if you take an hourglass, tip it on its side, think of this for just a minute. On the one side of the hourglass are people like you. It's the design talents and design arts, and people like Dana and Janine Benyus and lots of folks who are mastering how we remake the human presence from the material side, the energy side, the built environment side, urban planning side. So that's the Rolodex side. On the other side, there are real problems, and they are evident in places like Detroit, Cleveland, Toledo, Youngstown, but also Boston and other cities. I mean, can we then build an institute as part of this, the neck of the hourglass, that functions as an ecological design center and deploys talent out to those sites and changes the design teams. And that would also include students of a variety of backgrounds. This is kind of the just a schematic on what we put together, involving lots of different people. And if I were to tell you that this is a harmonious gathering right now, that would be premature. It was said of Oberlin once that if you put all Oberlinians into a burning building, they would not only not be able to come up with a plan of egress, but they would refuse to do so. They would burn to death. That was a joke. I'm going to have a sign up here that says, anyway, we are one of 18 sites selected by the Clinton Climate Initiative as a climate positive project. And now the details of this. There is a development corridor. Not all of this obviously is college, but a development corridor that runs about 1.5 miles through the heart of the city. At the north end, the city has plans now to build a carbon-neutral school building, consolidated school building, roughly a $50 million project, designed rather like the Lewis Center, so the building itself becomes its own curriculum, and consciously designed to be a curriculum in energy, biology, climate systems, local issues of all kinds, like in materials and so forth. A green arts block, and you'll see more about that. This is Tappan Square. If you're familiar at all with Oberlin, that's the town square. These are both 13 acres. A theater you'll see that the college acquired. This project, you'll see one sign. It's done by 3 former students of mine. There's a restaurant here that's part of the green and slow food movement. Their service is also slow. They pioneered slow service before they got into slow foods. Biofuels, another former Oberlin student of mine, and then a student has purchased an abandoned supermarket and wants to make that into an environmental Costco. So that's the development corridor. The Green Arts District from the air looks like this. This is the Allen Art Museum, a Cass Gilbert building you'll see in just a minute. Performing Arts Center, hotel you'll see. But this whole block is to be redeveloped with a fair amount of new construction. This is the Art Museum, one of the 4 Cass Gilbert buildings on the Oberlin campus. He's the guy that designed the U.S. Supreme Court and the Woolworth building and some others. This is the Performing Arts Center. Everything, and you're looking at the west face of this, everything to the east of this facade needs to go and be substantially improved. This is the Oberlin Inn, and this was built to the incredibly exacting comfort and design standards of interstate motels about 1955. And you may have seen in the New York Times last fall that bed bugs had invaded Ohio. They checked into the Oberlin Inn the week before the Oberlin trustees checked in for their fall meeting. And so the trustees came up with a variety of plans to improve the inn, beginning with a megaton range event. Our president is the former chief attorney for the University of Michigan, a lawyer. And lawyers are trained to calibrate punishment with crime, and so he suggested only a kiloton explosion. But we need a new hotel, or we need to seriously renovate that hotel. So that's a major project. And so there's a discussion taking place right now of whether we can do adaptive reuse of an old hotel and raise it up to roughly 4-star standards, but keep most of the old building there, or we have to tear it down and go to a new structure. This is the Charles Martin Hall house. This anchors the southeastern corner of the block. Charles Martin Hall is the guy who figured out how to get bauxite or aluminum out of bauxite, or one or the other. And that's the back room here is where he discovered that process. He was a chemistry undergraduate at Oberlin. This is Bob Berkebile's at BNIM Architects rendering. This is not a schematic. This is simply a placeholder. This is the hotel site. We're not going to build a hotel that looks like this, but this is a placeholder for hotel and a business incubator, a placeholder for a classroom building, a living machine to process all the wastewater from the block, a hall auditorium, and so forth. So we've begun to plan on this a good bit. We're hoping to have a site plan finished within the next 3 to 4 months, and then drilling down on the specific buildings that will be part of this. And each one of these will have a RFQ go out on the street for the individual components. That is the site plan analysis, and again, we're asking that the hotel, which will occupy the corner, will not look like this. It'll be more like this, facing out on the Tappan Square. But we're asking that this hotel not just be a great hotel, but it'd be the best hotel ever done from a green perspective and also be a hotel. So we're looking for hoteliers. I've been interviewing hoteliers. I'm way beyond my pay grade right now doing things like this, but interviewing hoteliers, and we want a hotelier that wants to be part of an incredible story and wants to stretch to the nth degree, because we've set the bar really high on this project. It has never been set higher in a hotel. The components of the whole block will include a hotel, restaurant to 4-star level, performing arts and music center, including black box theater, housing for students, and probably some mixed housing and condominiums and so forth. New businesses, there's an incubator, and there'll be 2 banks located there and so forth. Advanced technology and the Ecological Design Center that I mentioned earlier. And these are designed to drive the economy. The difference here is we want this at the platinum level equivalent. Drinking water in, drinking water out, powered by sunlight, local materials, and so forth. But we want this also to be the driver for the local economy. So the design team has to figure out how this is provisioned and built and how to maximize the long-term sustainable effect on a local economy in the upper Midwest. The effects on the downtown have already been pretty dramatic. Property values, before we've even broken ground on most anything, property values have gone up. I'll come back to the Greenbelt in just a minute. New businesses are beginning to come in. A couple of solar companies have located into Oberlin. The jobs and careers have not yet started, but I believe that they will very soon. We want to see this whole project, the entire project, including out to the Greenbelt, as an educational project. I don't worry about being able to contain the worst of climate change, but I do worry about us wallowing and marinating in despair, especially for young people. They'll look at the magnitude of the challenge and simply give up. We've got to introduce them to this effort. So I want my students to work with people like you who have the habits of rolling up your sleeves and solving real problems and begin to remake the fabric of human life on the planet. We believe that this can be a destination center. You put all the pieces together. In January, I was out at Stanford University, and I was introduced by a man who works at National Geographic Traveler magazine. And he happened to have 3 copies of National Geographic Traveler on the dais there, and I picked them up and I said, after he introduced me, I said, you know, every one of those covers has palm trees and beaches. Every one of those sites is going underwater. So we need to rethink ecotourism. How about making places like Oberlin an ecotourism destination? And places like Detroit and so forth. You know, if you go on ecotourism, you want to get a bag of trinkets, you probably end up with a sunburn, and you probably come back with a bad hangover. Well, you can come to Oberlin. We can do 2 of those 3. You won't get much of a sunburn, but we can give you a hangover if you want it. It's happened before, and we can sell you all the trinkets you want, but to leave a place also with a glimpse of what the future can be, that we're not condemned to be unsustainable. We can begin to create places, real places, that operate sustainably and prosperously without carbon fuels. Here's the project that's begun by, this is the south edge of the Green Arts District. The Green Arts District starts across the street. This was begun by 3 former students. It is an incredible story. I won't tell it tonight, but 3 former students, one of whom was a student of mine. They put this together. It's a $17 million project. It's commercial space on the first floor, mixed houses and housing and offices above that. It'll be LEED gold. It could come in low platinum, but this is about to be completed. This is the Apollo Theater, and it looks just like it did in 1925. The college purchased that. We're putting this is also just across the street from the Green Arts block that's on the right. The cinematography program is coming into this, and we're at least talking about having environmental cinematography component to this. So young people acquire the skill set to be able to transfer lots of information by films and video and so forth. This is a LEED gold jazz facility that's just about to be completed. The first concert is scheduled for late this month with Stevie Wonder, and Bill Cosby will be there. On the other side of Tappan Square, another Cass Gilbert building. This is Fina Chapel. This is a typical downtown view. This is an old rehabbed school building in the downtown. So this is very typical Midwest country. This is the Greenbelt. It won't look like that, but in thinking about how we provision, how do we repair the fabric of the world around a project? Greenbelt for us is important. Right now we import most all of our food from California and very distant places. If you look at Northeast Ohio, our food budget is $6 billion per year. we grow locally 200 million of that $6 billion. And so the idea is to begin to develop, resuscitate local farms. We're aiming for initially 35 small farms. I don't know where things like this are made, wood products, but I do know that we would like to begin making them locally. And that's a resuscitated forestry business with the educational component of the Oberlin Project, providing the training in cutting, milling, drying of wood, and also fine woodworking. The college and schools providing courses in woodlot management and ecological forest ecology and so forth. Then it's also carbon sequestration, biofuels, green jobs, forestry, and so forth locally. So if you put a compass down on our town square, draw roughly a 7-mile radius, that's our target of opportunity. That is the Oberlin Project. This is a rough and dated schematic of kind of the organization chart. Everything I've described has been done somewhere, someplace else quite well. Can you find sustainable agriculture? Sure you can. Can you find great buildings? Absolutely. You've designed many of them. All the components are out there. The difference for us is to put all those together into a single working model and make it work economically. And so to make this happen, we've assembled a leadership team. There's more circles than I can put on the screen here, but they include education, funding, business, community relations, and so forth. So this is where the difficulty really does begin. It's not, can you do sustainability? I think we can do it. Not sure quite how all the pieces will fit together, but the critical part will always be, as you know, it's going to be the human factor. It's how you deal with the people who pay for your services. It's how you deal with the local zoning boards and so forth. I mean, the human factor is always the most difficult. This is Bob Berkey, great architect. Bob was part of the founding of the USGBC and also part of the Living Building Challenge. A couple of closing comments here. This is the policy side of this. After California passed AB 32, there was a marked increase in economic activity, dramatic increase in economic investment and green jobs and so forth. It has continued even in the face of economic downturn. That, by contrast, is the state of Ohio. Policy matters, as all of you know. You and I could do better buildings, better projects if we get the policy gauges and dials set to encourage things, including such things that are very mundane that happen elsewhere, like feed-in tariffs for renewable energy systems. This is Senator Sherrod Brown on the roof of the Lewis Center, and right after I took this picture, Sherrod turned to me and asked, where'd you get that photovoltaic array right behind him? That's a 100 kW array. And I said, well, you know, Sherrod, our choices were you could buy from Germany or you could buy from Japan, but you couldn't buy that in the state of Ohio when we needed it. And the irony was not lost on him. He is 24 miles, almost to the mile, from the NASA Glenn Space Center that developed most all the photovoltaic technology and production methods. 50 miles to the west of us is First Solar, the largest solar manufacturer, or at least one of the largest solar manufacturers in the United States. But they had dedicated all of their production for the next 5 years to Germany. This is no way to run an economy. So we've got to begin to realign policy and direction at the national level, state level, and local level to support the kind of work that all of you want to do and are certainly capable of doing. This is the sustainability revolution. It isn't just about building technique and architecture and engineering and technology. It's also about public policy and attitudes and who gets elected to what positions where. Let me close with a couple of thoughts. I began by describing the science. And people sometimes blow that off and say, well, gee, that's doom and gloom. Don't go there. This is not doom and gloom. It's simply what the science is telling us, that this is an incredibly hazardous age and growing more so almost by the day. Even in an economic downturn last year, we added 2 parts per million and a fraction to the CO2 levels in the atmosphere. That was in a bad year. We are playing with a non-linear system. The question now is whether we can act decisively, imaginatively, lovingly, caringly, and competently enough to contain the worst of what could happen. And what would life be like for us? Well, greenhouse world doesn't have to be bad. More bike trails, more baseball leagues, more people that bowl together, a world where neighbor isn't just a noun, it's a verb, where people take care of each other. You could take this list on the screen and you could multiply that 10 times over. That is not a bad world. That's a world where we don't make a fetish of economic growth for all the reasons Donella Meadows told us 40 years ago. But we do make a priority for people of all kinds, including future generations. That leads me to my last point. The word posterity is mentioned only once in the U.S. Constitution. It's in the preamble. But the climate effects of what we're now seeing deprive or will deprive future generations of life and liberty and property. And that violates not only the wording of the Constitution, but also the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment and every moral stricture you have ever heard from whatever religion. We can't go there. This is my stake in the future, or one of my stakes in the future. These are my 4 grandkids. On the left-hand corner here, that's Ruby Kate. She's now 3.5. She, as I mentioned to one of you before dinner, is in her fairy princess stage. And she told me I'm her chief consultant on this issue. And there are big books written on how to be a fairy princess. I wasn't aware of that before. Her mama is an Irish attorney. Her daddy, my son, is a computer company executive, and her language is the strangest mixture of computer talk and sue the bastards. She is a lot of fun. This is Lewis. Lewis announced to me, he's 10 now. He's gifted athletically, but he announced to me at Christmas time that he doesn't just want to make the big leagues. He wants to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I know 1/4 of the genes in his body. And while I was trying to encourage him, my head was going up and down like that. My brain was going, no way, no how. You are roadkill on the highway of ambition. But he loves to read. He's read the entire Harry Potter series and full of life and fun. His sister Molly is to his left. Molly is now 8, and she is also in her a more advanced fairy princess stage. She refuses any help from me, but she is highly independent and hugely funny, great sense of humor. And that's Maggie on the right-hand side. She's just over a year now. That's an older picture. That's my stake in the future. These 4 grandkids and their children have no voice unless it's my voice or your voice. They have no capacity to change the world ahead unless we change it first. They are subjected to violations of their rights under the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment to life and liberty and property. This is a matter, your work and mine, not just of working with a client now. This is the great work of the time. This is to ensure that the enterprise of life in all of its wild, crazy diversity continues. This is what, and I'm going to skip over this slide, this is what Tom Berry, the great theologian, described in one of the last books he wrote before he died in his 90s as the great work. And no generation ever asked for its great work. It's painful. The young men who fought and died to end the scourge of slavery in the United States didn't want to go and die in places like Antietam or Gettysburg or Shiloh or the wilderness, but they did it. The generation that is leaving the scene now that Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation didn't want to do the same thing and make those ultimate sacrifices at the Battle of the Bulge in Iwo Jima and so forth. That was your grandparents, in some case your parents and uncles and so forth, but they did their work. They stopped the scourge of fascism and communism and ended the Depression. That was their great work. And our great work is rather kind of simple, no less painful, and it will be no less risky. First thing is we've got to stabilize and then reduce all greenhouse gases. If the Earth was a patient and you brought it into the emergency room, the first thing that you would do would be to stabilize the vital signs. And the vital signs for us start with the carbon cycle. And then you quickly get to the nitrogen cycle, and that's a different talk. Turn the coin over. The next thing you do is make a rapid transition to renewable energy. And all of you know this much better than I do. The technology exists to do it. This is not a matter of technology or even of economics. This is a matter of political will, judgment, and affection for life on the planet. Thirdly, we've got to create a global bargain. There is no army big enough. There's no Star Wars shield robust enough. There are no military expenditures that can save us. We've now got to enter the world community. And the skills that you have in abundance, you have to now share with the rest of the world. It isn't just a matter of green buildings in the United States. This now has to be a green revolution across the entire planet. It has begun. Many of you that identified in the room are part of that, and work that's going on in India and South Asia and China and so forth. The revolution has begun. Now we have to take it to scale. And fourth, we need a different paradigm. And the paradigm of green buildings underneath all the talk isn't just a technology revolution. It is a revolution in how we see the human presence in the world. It is a revolution about precaution, love, affection, and care for how we use materials. And then finally, Howard Odum, before he died, and his wife Elizabeth wrote a little book called The Prosperous Way Down. It's way too easy for people to blow all this stuff off and say, well, you're talking about going back to the caves and sackcloth and ashes. It could be that if we wait too long. It does not have to be that. This means that we have to be ingenious enough to see what Dana Meadows saw 40 years ago, that the growth economy in lots of ways is a fraud. And we all know, you've all seen the work of Richard Esselstyn and other economists that show that the amount of stuff we have goes up like that. That's gross national product. Happiness in this country peaked supposedly about the year 1957. Now, for some of you, it may have peaked later or earlier, I don't know. But you got to explain this gap between the amount of stuff we have and our happiness level, which is kind of stable. And that gap has gotten bigger over the years. Well, duh. We know that stuff doesn't make us happy. And we all know, beyond some very minimal level, it's the relationships we have, it's your marriage, it's your partnership, it's the things you engage in together with people. That's what the priority has got to be. And we've known that for a long time. Does this economy have to be a sackcloth and ashes, doom and gloom economy? Not unless we allow it to happen. It does not have to be there. There is green hope. But let me end with this. If you're optimistic about the future, you don't know enough. If you're in despair, that is, Gandhi said, a sin. The sweet spot here is hope. But hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. If you're optimistic or despair, you don't have to do a thing. You can sit there and wallow in one or the other, but you don't have to do anything. But if you're hopeful, and all of you are hopeful, your craft, your profession, your accomplishments, the buildings that I've seen on the screen here today, those are acts of hope, but it's applied hope. And there can be a hopeful future, but it means all of us roll up our sleeves and get down to work and make that world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. David would be happy to take any questions or comments. I know some people have to hit the road. You've had a long day, but we could also do any questions or comments that anybody might want to do.
How did you convince everyone at Oberlin to sign on to your plan?
Next question. You know, consensus, I wasn't just kidding about the burning building comment. Consensus, we are a contentious people. But in terms of persuading people, there are direct threats. There are arguments. I think, though, in all of this, what we have to show is a world that actually works for people. Oberlin College, or Oberlin Town, the city of Oberlin, is sometimes said to be a wealthy city. It's not. We are a snapshot of a poor city in the upper Midwest. 34% poverty rate, 54% of the kids in the public schools are on free or reduced lunch cost. So we're a poor city. We're a good snapshot. But to make this work, we're going to have to show that we create jobs and business. It looks good, it works well, and it creates just a very different kind of world. I wouldn't say that everybody is convinced, but I will say this, that when the Clinton Climate Initiative vote came to the City Council, I spent an hour and a half in a work session with City Council. The vote the following week was a unanimous vote. And I don't think they had not had a unanimous vote since sometime back in 1350 or something. We don't, I mean, but I think that the politics of sustainability, you know, it's easy, I think, for all of you who are architects, well, all of you know this better than I do, that what you do as a project goes through the political mill. And whether it's internal politics for the institution, the client that you work with, or it's the politics of city council, or the state, or whatever it might be, but the political realities, we have to take sustainability and make it understandable as you move it through the regulatory process, the financial process, and the political process. But Oberlin has a city council that's reelected every 2 years, and so we're always 2 years away from disaster. But we have to keep working at it. And the political process, if we've convinced everybody up to this point, that doesn't mean that tomorrow morning we find out that we've had defections out of the coalition. So sustainability is going to be an ongoing political process, but we have to make it in everybody's self-interest to keep on that path. The building I showed you, one last comment, the building I showed you from on the new construction on the south side of the Green Arts District, that went through, the 3 former students that did that project went through hell and back, but they stayed with it, and they stayed with the political process. And it's an amazing story. I hope before long it's out in film and book form, but it's just a matter of staying with it. And so much of this stuff for me as a professor, it's real easy to get the academic side about it and read long books and sign long books about sustainability. Boy, in Main Street, it is a whole different subject. And that's, but thanks very much for the question. I appreciate that.
I love the idea of a green arts and center cultural building. And I would like to go back to my city and propose such a thing, since they are in the midst of considering obtaining an arts and culture building, which we don't have. And I wonder what you envision would be the services that this sort of building would provide to the community members.
Well, thanks for the question. It is not just a building. It's an entire district. It's a 13-acre block devoted to the arts. And let me describe on Tuesday, I mentioned I was at a hotel in Greensboro. It's the Proximity Hotel done by Dennis Quaintance, and it's the only platinum-rated hotel in the country. And Dennis is quite a character, an incredible hotelier. He understands finances all the way down, and all the way out to the technology of the building. Walking through the 2 hotels, the Proximity being one, the O'Henry being the other, that he owns, what Dennis did was to tie the self-interest of a lot of local people into the hotel. Walked into what was a kind of a high-end lobby in the Proximity, and this is a 4-star hotel or beyond. And he had what looked like very high-fashion furniture, tables and so forth there. I asked him about those, and he said, "Oh, no, that was made by my neighbor." And what he had done was to allow local craftspersons to put materials, painting, wall paintings, and so forth, in the building. And he got it cheaply. They got the exposure. And so, bingo, you got a bargain. And that was true of the paintings on the walls and lots of other services. The woman that provided the flowers for the conference facility was there. Local woman, she just picked a whole bunch of stuff off the roadways. It was blooming down in North Carolina. And, but he tied the hotel into the local economy. We're trying to do that with the whole block and let that be the driver for local economic development. But your question's a good one, because how do you stitch a green development, a green building, or at the neighborhood scale or individual scale, into a local economy? So it's something that's in everybody's benefit to make it a success story. And it's not just a single standalone. It isn't that wonderful a green building. It's the fabric around it was repaired, as Chris Alexander says. And part of the fabric that's gone bust, as the first couple of slides I show, is we had an economy that was largely a Ponzi scheme. We were never as wealthy as we thought ourselves to be. And of course, the irony now is that we may be wealthier in things that really count than we knew we were when we thought ourselves to be merely rich. Do you follow what I'm saying? Neighborhood relations, people coming together to solve problems, people maybe making less money but doing more for themselves. That word neighbor is a noun. We make it a verb. It means to act. And I think that could be reflected in buildings. But it's an interesting question. And I would be fooling you if I said I've got all the answers to this. But I think it'd be both questions. Is can we stitch these things into a local economy and into the local fabric and into the affections of the people who live in a particular place? So thanks for that question. Right here in the middle, I can't see hands up real well, but.
Thank you for that talk, David. I'd be curious to know a little more about how you plan to involve about 1,000 students in the rolling out of this whole Oberlin project.
How we plan to involve students?
Yeah, you said something about that early on. If you could just give some examples.
Well, thanks for that. We got some experience in this with the Adam Joseph Lewis Center, which you saw 2 pictures of the Lewis Center. Began that in 1995. That was my project, and I was told by the administration we could do the building, but I had to raise all the money for it from sources not otherwise likely to give to the college. And I used to laugh and say, well, that left us the Colombia drug cartel, until a Colombian native told me not to do that anymore, or I'd be killed. The college was nervous about that, and we put out an announcement that if you want to be part of building a building, come on in. Now, the generation of kids, some your children, some your grandchildren in a few cases here, they've come through a rough era. Divorce rates run about, 50% or whatever it is. They've seen a lot of violence vicariously. Some have experienced it. They've seen a lot of uncertainty. And if you think they don't understand climate change, I think you're kidding yourself. They understand it. They may not react to it, talk much about it, but they know this world is changing dramatically. So the question is, once you tell them this stuff, and once you raise that to conscience, what you do with young people is you raise the energy level. And then you got 2 choices. You can either deflect it to something positive, or you can let it go negative. And so my obligation as a teacher, yours is as a designer, is to tell the truth, speak the truth, do the truth. And having done that, then what do we do with that anxiety level, that energy level that we've raised? And I don't have a good answer for that. The only answer I've got is to engage that energy in something that is positive. I want my students working with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, the Lorain County Metro Parks, for example, in putting together that green belt. I want some of those kids who want to get their hands back in the dirt again, growing food that we buy locally within the green belt. That restaurant, that 4-star restaurant, that ought to be provisioned as much as you can provision it. The free-range chicken, the rutabaga, everything ought to come from that green belt around there. I want to have that market, and the kids who want to get into agriculture, give them a place to do it. The kids who want to get into banking and business, I want them to have business opportunities to stay in Oberlin. Sell us efficiency, sell us wood products, sell us services, sell us whatever you want to sell us, but I want them there. But they have to be 2 things have to happen. They have to acquire the competence to do that. And that's a different competence, and we typically, I think, offer in most liberal arts colleges. And secondly, they've got to be validated. We've got to give them a chance to solve these things. And you'll notice that the leadership level is working down. I think it's partly a function of Twitter and Facebook and email and so forth. It's the electronic generation. The leadership age is dropping down to younger and younger ages. But this is their time. It's their world. They'll inherit it. We need to bring them into the process of reweaving this fabric of the way we provision ourselves with food, energy, water, materials, livelihood, health care, entertainment. And it is a tremendous way to do this. Now, one last thing before Andy kicks me out of here. The ideas of pedagogy, this is a whole nother talk, but the ideas of pedagogy, and I don't much like that word. It sounds like a foot disease. You know, if you got pedagogy, yeah, but I'm taking something for it. The theories here of engagement of people go way, way back. They certainly go back to John Dewey's time. And John Dewey said, make the school a laboratory. But every building you build is an instructional device. That's the power of what you do. And it may not be at the conscious level, but people begin to understand energy, space, human relationships, materials, and something about their relationship to the wider world because of how you build. So the most powerful educational device we've ever invented after television is a shopping mall. And it tells young people, it tells everybody, that if you want it, buy it. If it itches, scratch it. If it feels good, do it. I mean, that's the inherent pedagogy or the curriculum of a shopping mall. Green architecture, sustainable architecture, the kind of work that you all are doing is a very different kind of thing. And certainly biomimicry is a different kind of thing. It's saying, hey, wait a minute, we can sit at the feet of nature and let nature instruct us. So how cool can that be? So instead of learning nature by dissecting dead cats, we learn it by assembling systems that are workable, sustainable, and mimic the way nature works. And if that's done in a reverent kind of way, that is an incredibly powerful thing to do. But that is a different mindset for young people. And that is what is captivating a whole generation of young people, not just in the United States now, but worldwide. And Dartmouth has been a leader in this for many, many years. Jim Hornig was the head of the Environmental Studies program back here in the 80s when I first came to Dartmouth. And Dana Meadows and so forth. I mean, you've had Dartmouth has been an incredible leader in this. But there's now a stream of young people who understand the world differently than it was taught during the industrial years. But we want to engage them. If they know that the doors are open, they'll be there. But our goal is to bring them in and have them connected with some of the greatest designers, thinkers, and so forth, and doers of our age in a project that helps to launch their lives and career. Thank you very much.